there's a feeling I think a lot of people are carrying around at the moment, and it's not panic or it's not dramatic enough to call a crisis, but it's more like this low level hum in the background of your life. You're doing your job, you're paying the bills, you're answering the emails, you're doing everything right. You seem to be living a responsible and sensible life, but yet something in you doesn't feel settled. And this feeling usually shows up on a Sunday night. That thing where you suddenly catch yourself scrolling job descriptions at midnight, not because you're actively trying to leave, but because some part of you is checking where the exits are. It comes up when someone asks you how work is going and you say, yeah, it's fine, but the word fine is doing like a lot of the heavy lifting. Or it comes up when you realize you've built a life that looks responsible on paper, but inside you feel really exposed. And for a long time, I thought there was something wrong with me. I had done what I was supposed to do. I'd worked really hard. I'd got the respectable roles. I'd earned a decent amount of money. I built a career that from the outside looked like progress. So when I still felt uneasy, I thought maybe I was being ungrateful. Maybe I was just restless. I did what a lot of us do when we feel this way, and I changed jobs. I even took a career break. I looked at pivoting, but the same feeling kept returning literally after I changed my situation in 3 months. What I finally came to realize was that I was noticing that the whole model I'd been taught to trust was much more fragile than it looked. Now, the advice many of us were given at the start of our careers by our parents, by elder members of our friends and family members, or our extended network, those strategies don't work in today's climate. For a lot of our families, especially first generation and second generation immigrant families like mine, a good job was not just a career choice. It was the whole definition of success. It meant safety. It meant that you had made it into rooms previous generations had been locked out of. In my family, that advice made sense because people had seen it work. So for example, my dad worked in the automotive industry for around 20 years at the same company. My aunt worked in the fashion industry for around 20 years. That was what they understood. You found a stable company, you worked hard, you stayed loyal, and in return, that company looked after you. You were able to build a life around that agreement. You could plan around it. You could raise children. You could buy a house. You could retire from it. And in that context, the advice was reasonable because the world moved slower. Careers were linear. Loyalty had some buying power. Staying somewhere for 20 years was not automatically seen as being stuck. It was seen as being solid. And it meant that you were dependable, and dependable people were supposed to be rewarded. But the world has changed and the advice didn't. The economy has changed, companies have changed, contracts have changed, the relationship between employees and employers has changed. But the language of loyalty stayed in the room, even when that deal is no longer on offer to us. We've all heard the stories. For example, my dad, was one of them. He worked for this company for many, many years. Then there was a merger, the contracts changed, and a couple of years after that, he was made redundant, with a package that obviously didn't reflect his length of service. We've all heard of those stories where people have worked for a company just to be let go with an email. These aren't anomalies anymore. They are characteristics of an insecure work environment that we've all been thrust into. We have been trained to think risk means entrepreneurship, but the risk is really relying on one income source, one employer, or one salary, or one organization with the power to change the terms of your life in a single meeting. One structure deciding whether you are useful, affordable, promotable, replaceable, or too expensive to keep. And the strangest part about all of this is that the more successful you become inside that structure, the harder it is to question it, because now you have evidence that it works. You have the salary, you have the job title, you have a little bit of respectability, and on paper, you are probably the success story. You're the one that your family points to at weddings. And questioning whether it's right for you becomes really inconvenient because it does not match the optics. It makes you feel really dramatic or even guilty for even thinking such things, even when you know deep down that something isn't right. So if you're nodding along to this and you are clever, capable, and already aware that how you earn is fragile, then why haven't you fixed it? Because your employer has worked out how to make money from your skills. They have taken what you can do, placed it inside a role, given it a job title, attached it to a salary band, built processes around it, sold the outcome to customers and clients and stakeholders and shareholders, and created profit from the difference between what they pay you and what you produce. So why aren't you trying to cut out the middleman, friend? Now, I can tell you why, because it took me so long to do it for myself. And that was because I'd only ever sold my value to one type of buyer, my employer. it had never once occurred to me that if I just sold my skills myself, I could be making 5x my salary. I didn't realize that selling my skills in the form of a salary was just one structure, one version of the truth. Think about that for a second. You would never let one buyer set the price of your house, but you have spent years letting one buyer set the price for what you can do. And this is why so many capable people genuinely do not know what they are worth outside their job. They know what their salary is. They know what their bonus might be. They know what the next promotion might add. They even know what a recruiter might say for a similar role, but they do not know what their actual skills could produce if those skills were separated from the job title and sold differently. And it gets worse the longer you stay in the job, because the job doesn't just pay you, it trains your identity. It becomes part of who you are. You learn how to describe your value in internal terms. You learn how to speak in acronyms, processes, performance reviews, job descriptions, and annual objectives. And inside the building, inside your job and your company, that language makes you look valuable. But outside the building, it can make your value weirdly invisible. You might be the person who keeps projects moving before they become chaos. You might be the person who spots problems 6 weeks before everybody else finally admits that there is a problem. You might even be the person who can translate a founder's messy ideas into a proper plan. But because those things have been buried inside a job description, you don't see them as assets. You just see them as, this is just what I do. And that, my friend, will have you leaving a lot of money on the table. Your employer is a buyer of your value, not the owner of it. You've just only ever sold it to one. So let me explain to you what you might actually be sitting on, because a lot of people think that they are paid for one thing: their job, the title on the contract, the formal responsibilities. So say, for example, operations lead or HR business partner, whatever it is. That is the obvious lane, the paid lane, the lane your employer has named, measured, and attached a salary to. But that is not the full picture. In reality, you are usually working across 3 lanes and only being properly paid for one. So the first lane is your job description. This is the visible work, the responsibilities people can point to, the tasks your manager knows you do, the output that appears in performance reviews, the deliverables, okay, the projects, the campaigns, whatever it is. This lane matters, okay, and I'm not dismissing it. It's often where your technical competence sits, and it's the easiest part of your value for other people to understand. The second lane is the invisible work, and this is where things start to get interesting, okay, because this is the work that makes everything else function, but often has no clean name. It's managing personalities, reading the room, anticipating what will go wrong, sensing some tension before it becomes conflict, holding teams together when the official process is useless, making like a messy human layer of work less chaotic. This lane is where a lot of people are deeply valuable, but deeply underpaid, because the work's often invisible. It just becomes expected the moment that you're good at it. People stop seeing it as a skill and start experiencing it. You become the person who just knows how to handle it. And that's lovely for them, but very expensive for you. Then there's a third lane, the transferable advantage. And this is the real power, because this is not the job itself. It's the pattern underneath the job. It's the thing you can do in one environment that would be useful in a completely different environment. And it's the part of your skill stack that can actually travel with you. Take these 2 examples. The first person says, I organize the diary and run the meetings. That is the job description version. It sounds like an admin task and it gets priced like one. But look at what actually sits underneath it. They are the one who decides what the executive team spends their attention on. They protect the CEO's time. They kill meetings that shouldn't exist and make sure that the right decisions get made in the room instead of dragging out over 3 weeks back and forth. The third lane version is not I organize meetings. It is I run the operating rhythm of a leadership team, so the people at the top spend their time on the decisions only they can make. This is the same work. One is calendar management and the other is a thing a scaling founder would pay a 4-figure monthly retainer for, because the alternative is a leadership team that is drowning in its own admin. The second example I have for you is people who say I work in HR. Fine, that's accurate, but it's also forgettable. But look at what you actually have spent your experience doing. That person is the reason good people stay. That person builds the onboarding that means a new hire is useful in 3 weeks instead of 3 months. That person coaches the first-time managers who would otherwise drive their best people out of the door. They are the difference between a team that scales and a team that falls apart at 30 employees. So again, it's not just I work in HR, it's I help founders keep their best people through the stage where most companies start losing them by fixing the onboarding and the management before it costs them their A players. It's the same skills. One is a job title, the other is a problem a scaling founder is genuinely frightened of, because losing 2 senior people in a quarter can set the company back a year. Again, same person, completely different valuation. This is why earning power has never just been in your job title. The title is often the least interesting part. The money is usually in the combination. It's in the crossover between what you know, what you notice, what you solve, who you understand, how you think, how you communicate, and what kind of outcome your skills can create for someone else. And most people can feel that they are worth more than one thing, the one thing that they're paid for, but they just don't have the words for it. They feel irritated when someone reduces them down to a job title, but they can't quite explain why, because they know they are doing work that doesn't fit neatly into the role. But because nobody has named it properly for them, it kind of stays as frustration instead of becoming an asset. Because when something stays vague, it cannot be priced properly. It can't be packaged, it can't be tested, it can't become income. It kind of just sits there while paying you for the narrowest possible version of it. Now, once people start to realize this, they often make the next mistake. And again, I am guilty of doing this myself. What we tend to do is we scatter. We think, right, I need more income, I need more options, I need to stop relying on my one salary. And then we run in every direction. We start an Etsy shop, candles, faceless YouTube, Amazon FBA, or whatever the next trending internet business is. And we burn ourselves out trying to learn a completely new skill set, starting right at the shitty beginner stage every time. So it's no wonder people give up, because it's exhausting learning a new business model, new tools, 50-11 skills, and constantly starting something new, especially when you have a demanding full-time job, a life, bills, family, a brain already carrying too many tabs. What you should be doing instead is building and stacking your income streams vertically rather than horizontally in random buckets. Start with the one foundation you already have, your actual expertise, because with that expertise, you already know what you're doing. You've already had years of experience in that very thing. So you're not entering the market as a beginner, but as someone with credibility and a track record. Those core skills become your tree trunk that anchors you to the ground. Then you build branches from that same tree trunk. One branch might be consulting, another branch might be a product, another branch might be advisory work. What you do is you build up these branches over time, which ultimately are all different expressions from the same core skill, with different price points, different formats, but the same foundations. So the tree trunk is your foundation. It's what you already know. It's what you've already been paid to do in some form, even if you've not been paid properly for the most valuable parts. The branches grow out of that foundation. They're not random. They are connected and they feed each other. So take the operations example I gave earlier, the one whose trunk is running the operating rhythm of the leadership team. Her first branch is consulting. She fixes the decision-making cadence for one scaling founder whose leadership team is busy all day and deciding nothing. And in doing that work, inside the real mess of a real company, it shows her the same handful of problems every founder at that stage keeps hitting. So she might then build out a second branch out of what she's learned, okay, a system or a template. And that template can be bought by a founder and they can install it by themselves without hiring her. Out of those founders, some of them might realize that, oh, they actually want her in the room to actually run this because it's too complicated for them to do by themselves, or they don't have enough time. So the cheap thing basically sold the expensive thing. Then let's say she starts posting about the operational chaos that she keeps on walking into. And then she starts attracting other founders who see themselves in that scenario. And they start contacting her because now they understand her offering and they understand how she can help. They're already nodding, okay? They're already half sold before she said a single word about working together. One of those founders runs a company people have already heard of. She might take an advisory seat. Now she advises that company and that sits on top of everything she does. And her rate goes up. Not because the work got harder, but because the proof around her gets louder. Then let's say a VC firm watches all of this happen and asks her to fix the same problem across 4 of their portfolio companies at once. One conversation, 4 buyers. Do you see how these conversations can stack up? How these different formats can stack up? All from doing the same work, all from the same core skills. Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking when you hear all of that. You're thinking 5 branches. I can barely keep the one job that I've got running. There's no chance that I can build all of that on the side. Good, because you're not meant to. And that example wouldn't have either. Look at the order. They didn't just stack all those 5 things at once. They built one, then out of that one, built the next, then the next, and then the next. The product wasn't necessarily a new venture. It was the consulting work written down. The audience wasn't a content business with a posting schedule. It was her just naming a problem that she was already being paid to solve. The advisory seat wasn't something that she would necessarily be chasing. It arrived because the first 3 branches made it possible. And this happens over years, not just one quarter, one branch at a time, each one funded and informed by the one before. And what's great about this is you're starting with your existing skills. Okay, they never had to start from zero. And that's the entire difference between building from a tree trunk and scattering. Every branch is made of work you've already done, just pointed at a different buyer. Not 5 jobs stacked on top of the ones you've already got. Just one skill expressed in 5 different ways. And over time, the whole thing starts to behave like a living ecosystem instead of a collection of frantic side quests. And this matters because resilience comes from connection. When you build branches from your own foundation, the structure changes. One branch can be small at first, and the point of it is for it to grow quietly in the background while your salary is still landing. At first, the salary may still be the biggest branch, and that's fine. Use it. Let it fund the build. Let it buy you your time. Let it reduce pressure while you test things. The goal is not to hate employment. The goal is to stop making employment your only option. And over time, your salary becomes one branch among many. That is a very different kind of life. Not because you're suddenly on a beach pretending like you don't have any emails, but because you are no longer an economical slave to one structure. Because you have other routes, you have other buyers, you have other expressions of your value, other ways your skills can move through the world and come back to you as money. That income ecosystem is the first layer of something much bigger. Most people inherit an economy. They have salary in, expenses out, and they save what they can and hope that the pension or the 401k behaves itself in time for you to retire. I am talking about building your own personal economy instead. Now, a personal economy has 3 parts. First, an income structure that you own, which is the ecosystem we've just talked about. Second, an identity outside your job title, because you cannot build real freedom while still needing a company to tell you who you are. And then third, a life designed on purpose around the things that actually matter to you. But every personal economy starts in the same place, and that's the income layer, because we all need income to survive. So before we talk about lifestyle, freedom, identity, or any of those bigger pieces, you need to know what your skills can actually become in the real world with real buyers, real rates, real routes, and real next steps. So where do you begin? Most people think the first move is to learn something completely new, but I'm willing to bet you probably do not need more skills. Your first move is to see the value in the ones you already have. You need to understand where your skills are being underpriced inside your current structure compared with what they could command outside of it. That gap is the opportunity, the gap between what one buyer has been paying you, aka your employer, and what other buyers might pay you for a sharper, cleaner, better packaged version of the same ability. And the reason why you're going to struggle to do this is a lot of us are using the wrong measuring system. We're trying to understand the value of our skills through a salary, but your salary is only one data point. It tells you what one employer is willing to pay you for one version of your skills inside one role under one business model. This is, of course, useful information, but it's not the whole truth. It's not even necessarily the most profitable version of the truth, because when you look at what recruiters are saying, you look at salary bands, you look at other people with the same job title as you ask, what does someone like me earn? But even that question is already too limited, because it assumes your highest value sits inside the same title, the same ladder, the same market, and the same exchange, and the same income model of selling your time for money. You give your company your hours, your judgment, your energy, your problem solving, your speed, your ability to make things work. And in return, they give you a fixed amount of money every month. That model can give you income, yes, but it is becoming less and less profitable for the employee by the minute, because the upside does not belong to you. If your work saves the business $100,000, you don't automatically make that $100,000. If your ideas create a new revenue stream, you don't own that asset. If your system saves the team 10 hours a week, you don't get paid 10 hours back. Most of the value you create is captured by the structure around you. Again, that is not a scandal. That is just how the traditional employment world works. But it means your salary is not a clean reflection of your market value. So when you ask, what am I worth? And you only look at your salary, your title, or what a recruiter says about the next version of the same job, you are asking the smallest possible version of that question. You are not asking what your skills could be worth if they were packaged as an outcome, or what part of your knowledge could become a product, a service, a workshop, an advisory offer, a system, or an asset, or a more flexible income model. You are asking what your labor is worth inside a structure designed to buy it at a discount. And that structure is too biased. It was never built to show you your full value. It was built to price one expression of your value in the least expensive format possible, which is a job. You do not need another salary benchmark. You need to find out what your skills are worth when they are taken out of the job title cage and priced as outcomes. But to do this, to really build an income ecosystem, you need to get very clear on what you bring to the table. An honest, clean self-assessment, okay? One where imposter syndrome or self-doubt does not sneak in, just an honest read. And this is why I built the Skills to Income Blueprint. It involves two parts. The first is the Skills to Income report, and that does the thing most people can't do accurately for themselves. It reads your skills from the outside and prices them honestly. It takes the work you've been doing and pulls out the highest value skills sitting underneath it. It shows you which parts of your experience have actual income potential beyond your job title, and it gives you a clearer way to understand what your skills are worth in the market. The second part is a video mini course which tells you how to implement and how to properly read your report so that you can make use of it in the right way. This is about extracting the commercially useful parts of what you already know and showing you where money can actually move through your skills and into your own pocket. Inside the report, you get your top 3 highest value skills named clearly. You see what each one is worth and how those map to different income models, so you're not staring at a blank page trying to figure this out alone. The link is right below this video, so go and do it now while you can still feel why it matters, because here is what will happen for most people. They will watch this, nod along, agree with every word that I've said, maybe even send it to a friend with a message like, "This is so true." Then they will close the tab and go back to work, answer another email, have another Sunday night wobble, scroll another job description at midnight, and change absolutely nothing. And I don't want that for you. I know it's uncomfortable to realize you may have spent years letting one organization underprice your skills that could have been building you something of your own. I know it's uncomfortable to see the gap between the life you say you want and the reality of where you are right now. But discomfort is not the enemy here, avoidance is. Do not let this become another thing that you never act on. Your salary has already given you one answer. Don't you want to know the full truth?